Onion Cycles podcast is about thought provoking, emotion evoking, action driven, step by step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello, my beloved fellow onions. How was your week? How were your days since we last talked to each other? I hope you're doing well and you're doing fine. I hope that the ongoing exercise of asking yourself, what would a person who loves themselves do, assists you, supports you in your healing journey, and gave you some or other insight in how you make decisions and blessed you with some wonderful decisions regarding your own self love journey. I am very grateful you decided to invest your time into another episode and be with me on this beautiful journey that we started 3 weeks ago. It is now week 4. We are closing off the chapter The Art of Love with our fourth part today. We are on story 12, episode 12, The Art of Love, part 4. And today everything is circling around the practice. So, we established in the very first episode that in order to earn and learn an art form, you have first to acquire the theory, which we did in part 1 to 3. And now we try to master the art by learning the practice of love. It is exciting. We are also diving into the subject of self love, and it brings everything that we talked about together for those of you who have decided to tune into this episode as your first one. A warm and heartfelt welcome to this beautiful space of vulnerability and healing and studying ourselves in order to get a good picture of who we are, what triggers us, and how we can heal ourselves. This is all about self discovery and self exploration. I'm happy that you're here. And we have been discussing mainly what Erich Fromm talked about in his essay, The Art of Loving. I will put this essay down into the description box. By now, we're on part 4 of this. You know how I recommend it every single time. Please be sure to stay curious, do your own research, read the essay. There might lie hidden a gem that you can only discover if you dive in for yourself. So if this resonates with you, click on the link and check out his written word or spoken word on the Inarity podcast. We are tying everything together and come now to Story 12, Episode 12, The Art of Love, Part 4, Practice. Before we dive into the practice that he describes as being first exclusive to acquiring any art and then exclusive to how to acquire a sense of love, is the topic of self love. Because there is a need to state the difference between what is selfish and what is self love. If it is a virtue to have respect and love for others, then it goes hand in hand with knowing that it is also a virtue to love myself. So, love for my own self is inseparably connected to the love for any and all others. So the attitude towards others and towards ourselves are conjunctive. So love of other and love of ourselves are not alternatives. They are inseparable. The next question that there needs to be asked is, what is selfishness then? Because selfishness is often ascribed to self love. Like, if we say we need to take care of ourselves and we not commit to meeting a friend or being there for a friend because we ourselves feel like we're drained and we don't have the energy, some people might say that this is a selfish act. And that is why I want to make selfishness a theme today. And also, Erich Fromm covers this as well in a whole paragraph in his essay. So, selfishness mainly describes the exclusion of any genuine concern for others. So, it's only taking, it's no giving, and the world basically revolves around oneself, and it's only looked at from the point of what one can get out of this world, what one can get from others, and there is like no respect for other people's dignity or integrity, for their needs, for it's the lack of interest as well, and it's sort of like a judgment of how everyone and everything is useful to oneself. So it's basically being unable to love. Most people say that selfishness and self love are identical opposites. So selfishness is supposed to be on one side of the spectrum versus self love is on the other side. But that's actually a huge misunderstanding because they are opposites. They're total opposites. Selfish persons love themselves too little. They actually hate themselves. So there is a lack of fondness and care for themselves, and that leaves them empty and frustrated. So they necessarily become unhappy and anxiously strive to snatch everything from life they can. So it is basically a cover up. They compensate for their failure to care for themselves, and they're incapable of loving others and themselves. Someone said, the people who need love the most are those who ask for it in the most unloving way. And that sort of plays into these characteristic of being selfish. I myself was a very selfish person. I can totally relate to his description. And I, looking back on it now that I'm a different person, and I'm trying to be a loving, caring, responsible person for others within myself and for myself as well, I can see that the only reason or the only possible conclusion for a selfish person is to not admit that they are actually selfish. And if they admit that they are selfish, then they are so far away from realizing that they are deserving of love that they need it the most. It wasn't until I started my healing journey that I realized how much hurt and pain and manipulation I brought into the lives of others. And therefore, it doesn't make it easier to live with someone who's selfish, but the first step is understanding, and the first step is opening the door of our heart to see if we can actually give something and have an open discussion, open conversation. Obviously, there are multifaceted layers to human relationships, so I'm not proposing or suggesting anything as a prescription. There is no prescription, there is no one way. You have to find out for yourself what works for you, what works for the other person. But this opens up a space of understanding, and that in turn then opens up a space where love can emerge from. I found that there was no love for myself, so I was selfish. And then from that selfishness, I went into the total other direction and thought unselfishness is the cure all for my own pain and my own hurt and my own lack of self love and my own lack of dignity and integrity. So I basically thought that a sense of virtue in pain, a virtue in being a victim, giving it all, never getting anything back, will save me and get me to a place where I feel loved and surrounded by people who love me. But actually, it was a different way because I attracted just people who basically sucked the energy and the love out of me, both in a professional sense and a personal sense, because now it is clear I only attract into my life what I send out. And if I send out that I'm a victim and that pain is a virtue, then actually I will get pain because that is what I feel like defines me at that stage. So if you have anyone in your life or if you're affected by these stages yourself, know that inherently within you there is good. Inherently within you there is love and a light, and you are needed in this world. You are needed because you are unique. You have something to bring to this world, to your circle, to your people, to your tribe, to your animals, to your nature, to your volunteer group, to your church, to wherever you are in the day. There is something you have that no one else can give, and in depriving yourself from your own love for yourself, you are depriving the world of your light, and you are depriving someone else who is in equal as much pain as you are and has equal the same experience of lack and of hurt and is wounded. And your smile might bring them the joy of the day and may spark and ignite within them something they thought that it isn't there. So in viewing the world as a opportunity in every second of the day, in every minute, in every hour, every situation that we're in, to shine our light and believe that your light is needed, may attract healing as an opportunity to understand yourself and your role you have chosen to play. I say that with all my heart open to you. It is not easy, and it is not something that just comes up in a seminar or a podcast and you understand it. It is practice that will get you to a stage to understand that you are actually very needed, that you have something to give, that your light is there to be shown on people, and that you are loved and you are love. Be sure to know that. I will say it again and I mean it with all my heart. You are light and you're love. Love yourself, be gentle with yourself, care for yourself, and know that only practice, and there needs to be failure as well, and there needs to be disappointment as well to rise above that. Only practice will get you to a point where you actually realize that this is true and where you actually feel your light within, where you actually get it reflected back by people and synchronicities happening. Know that this is on your way, this is on your timeline if you consciously decide and have the will to put in the practice to do it. Which brings us to the practice of the art of love, as outlined by Erich Fromm. He first basically dives into the general form of how to attain and learn any form of art. There are four things that come into play if you want to learn any form of art. The first is general requirement of discipline. So only if I'm in the mood is basically outlining a hobby. So if you're only in the mood to do knitting when you're in the mood, then that's a hobby. But a art form can only be acquired when you put discipline into it. Our whole society is structured around little self-discipline because the routination of our days of 8 hours of work and then everything after work can be fun and pleasure and relaxation and slouching and slothing around, that self indulgence, that basic distrustfulness of discipline, of authoritative discipline, of a authoritative figure, is sort of leading our lives to become shattered, chaotic, and they lack concentration and discipline. How discipline looks, and we talked about this in our 4C episode, it is basically consistency framed in another word, is up to everyone uniquely in their own way. I talk a lot about how it is okay to have 2, 3 days or however long it takes, as long as you never give up and come back. And the reason I talk about it in that way is because that is my experience. Erich Fromm comes from another point. He says that there is a regularity to everything you do. You set aside time for meditation, for reading, for walking, for something that is an productive way of spending your time, and you do it in a very conscious sense. Set time aside and do it routinely. And you do it not because someone else put it on you to do it. It's not like imposed on you. It is more like it becomes an expression of yourself, of your will. It becomes so much an expression actually that it is felt as pleasant at some point. At some point, you don't know yourself anymore without this habit, without this routine. You don't feel comfortable anymore. So you're not indulging in escapist activities, partying and drugs, but you don't overeat or overdrink. You basically discipline yourself to not indulge into things that limit your expression of productivity, that limit your expression of self. And personally, I I can't disagree with him on any of it. I know that there are some things in my life that I can't, I mean, I can obviously, if it's a life and death situation, I can do without them, but I want to keep them in my life because I know they keep me sane, they keep me balanced, and they overall enrich my life experience and enrich my balance and my mental health enormously. So I know what he's talking about, but I'm far away from achieving the kind of discipline that he's talking about because there are still some days where I overindulge, I overeat as a coping mechanism, and I'm still getting to know my own coping mechanisms and how I can sort of reframe them or redirect them in a way that they become healthy in themselves, if you know what I mean. So his description of discipline I can't 100% fulfill. And that is why, in my description of discipline, or as I call it, consistency in what you're doing, I advise you to listen to yourself closely because this is a process. We're all onions, we're shedding our layers, and we decide what we put on in form of layers again. And some layers we can't shed yet. So be gentle with yourself and be nice. There is a lot going on in our lives. There is a lot going on an everyday basis. And I really want to emphasize here that it is a unique relationship that you build with discipline. The second requirement in order to learn any art form, he says, is concentration. He dives deep into concentration. So if you check out his essay, you also will be blown away. You also will find yourself in these sentences as so many of us in our society will find themselves in the description, because as a society that is trained to crave instant gratification, learned and admired to be multitasked, and a consumer eager to swallow anything given to him in any form, uh, it is very difficult. And he basically suggests that try it out, sit still, don't drink, don't smoke, don't eat, don't read a book, don't listen to music, don't watch TV. Just sit with yourself in a quiet room and see how you react. And he says the majority of people would start fidgeting, would find it very difficult, and some might even get anxious. We're used to constant stimuli in our outside world, and every stimuli that we have, every stimulus in our life is designed to keep us from being alone with ourselves. So, what he suggests is to introduce basically a meditation and breathing exercise every morning and every night, after waking up, before going to bed, and training this sort of concentration in a way that is graspable. But on a bigger scale, he says that concentration is something that is total presence. So you could translate what he called back in the 50s concentration in today's terms as mindfulness and awareness of fully being in the now, basically giving life depth in every aspect. So you're fully there, you're not doing two things at once, you're not thinking about the next thing you're doing while you're doing one thing. So if you're in the park feeding the ducks with your child, you're there fully. And you're not thinking about where to go next or what happened at work that day or anything else except for feeding the dogs with your child. And you feel the breeze and you hear the dogs and you feel the bread and you talk with your child and you're fully there and fully present. And I felt strongly about this point because I feel it's so funny that in the 1950s Erich Fromm was basically in other with other words and other terms saying the same exact thing that spirituality and psychology and coaches tell us today, which is basically point one, discipline. You need to be consistent in whatever you say you want to do. Otherwise, you break a promise to yourself and you break the trust you form with yourself that eventually results in you not loving yourself and not holding yourself accountable and not assembling yourself. And then you also need to be present and be in the here and stop being so scattered with your thoughts and always at the next appointment, in the next day, in the next task on your to-do list. That is very eye-opening to me. That back in the 50s and even way back, but like we're discussing this essay now, so back in the 50s, this awareness was already there, which then brings me to point three, of one general requirement, or the three general requirements for every art form, which is patience. I don't even know. I don't think Erich Fromm is still alive. I don't think so. But if he would be, he would have had to be very patient with our society for us to reach a peak of being at the top of the Maslow pyramid to find out that we basically have to rethink our whole societal structure. What he says comes or plays into patience is that we are trained from our economic values that are eventually transcending into a human values, that everything needs to be quick. There need to be quick results, there need to be shortcuts. Every system that is faster is better, and everything is designed for quickness, from the products with their short longevity so that we buy more to our own daily life, where we have all these apps that supposedly save us time, but then the time we have at our disposal, we sort of just kill time, is like a a paradox that only came to me personally recently, is how everything is supposed to give us more time, but what we do with that time is basically just kill it by with entertainment, or with something, fill it with something else that has nothing to do with feeling that we actually save time. We are always in a hustle, and we're always trying to have more time at our disposal, but then actually we're doing nothing with it. But yeah, that's another paradox. So, anyway, the three main requirements to learning any art, according to Erich Fromm: discipline, concentration, and patience. And then he dives into the essence, that is, the specifics of how to learn love, or how to practice love, because he says that we need to overcome our narcissistic tendencies. And at first I was like, well, I'm not a narcissist. And then I listened closer, or read closer, and the reason why I was immediately rejecting that word is because it's been thrown around today for specific people that do some things to other people. But in essence, what he is describing is very true, because we as a society are very narcissistic. We think the world revolves around us. So we believe that our own perception is the prevailing perception. Like, there's only the reality that I live, and in fact, it's just in our head. And it's the person next to you on the train might have a totally different reality. You wouldn't even know that, but still you think that yours is the one that counts the most important one. That is spun even further as a train of thought, because it's not just our parents that have expectations of us as children, and that then we have to live up to and operate from. We also have like a whole generation, we have countries, we have a society of narcissistic tendencies, and the only cure for that is to be objective, and to have reason, and to have humility, to emerge from the perception that just because we feel, think, or act a certain way, the expectation, the outcome has to be this, that, and this. He says, like, to strive for objectivity, getting sensitive to when I'm not objective, and learn why I'm not objective in that situation. And then the difference between my and other person's interests, needs, and fears, making that distinction and realizing that there actually is a gap. There might be a gap between what other people go through, what we go through. It all, to me personally, comes down to our episode of Sonda, where we discussed how every person on this planet has as vivid and expansive and rich a experience of life as we have for our own life. So in keeping Sunder alive within our hearts, and realizing that we need to be objective, and then realizing we need to dissect when we are not objective, why that is, why did that trigger us, where does that emotion come from. That is when we regard everybody, and not just our loved ones, as people who deserve respect and love. After the that step of becoming objective, there is a whole different depth to the art of love, which is faith. So there is so much more that goes into the practice of love than just viewing it from a theoretical point of view, viewing it through a practical point of view. It's a learning curve through experience. And that's where I want to close today's episode, because there is so much information that we went through. There is a lot to digest. And I do hope that the worksheet I put together is of help and support to you, is a good resource for you to go back over and see the outlines that we discussed today. You can download this worksheet on my website www.onedefined.org for free, and it is, I believe, a valuable resource to go back over what we discussed on this episode and then actually do the exercises that are mentioned on it to deepen the experience, because after all, our motto, our credo on this podcast is think, feel, and act. And act is the most important part, because only then will we implement it in depth in our life experience, and only then can it show an effect in our life experience. So, with all of that said, this to me personally is mind blowing, and I absolutely loved doing this 4-part series on the art of love. Like I said, this is scratching the surface of the topic. We will come back to a multitude of the different things he touched on and we touched on our discussions. For now, I feel like it is enough to say that this has been a vast and enriching experience of revisiting an essay from 1950s and discussing building our mindset, building our conclusions on what he proposed. I myself went through the narration and the reading of the text multiple times, and I feel like I will come back to it quite a few more times, because whenever I go back to it, it gets a new depth and I get a new understanding from it. So I would highly recommend you, if you feel that this resonates with you, to go back, read it for yourself, listen to it for yourself. I wholeheartedly hope was of service to you. I hope that what I have outlined made sense to you, was concise enough. I feel very privileged that you spend your life force, your time, your most precious thing on this earth with me on this subject, and may it contribute to your healing. I want to say that I'm very grateful that you are coming back to this and giving me your trust and having an ongoing work on yourself. I know you're doing the best you can with the resources you have. I see you. I understand you. I wish you the best. I wish you wonderful synchronicities, beautiful experiences, and send you with all my heart, from my heart, all the love in the world. I love you, my beloved fellow onions.